we are now recording, so let's just rewind it a little bit in our conversation.
Yeah, just a few seconds. Yeah, so we were just talking about well, this podcast, I suppose that's the easiest thing to say, of like for many podcasts just stop as there isn't anything really that we can really talk
Left.
about anymore. There's like nothing left to discuss and to talk about. Whereas um with us because of how we've designed this podcast, it's not really a thing for
Yeah.
us because our topic is ecological based, which means everything we talk about because it's just life and our experience. So every single thing we talk about is relatable to the theme of the podcast.
Yeah, that's so I actually found out that someone had stopped their podcast, not by them saying it, but by someone else that I spoke to. So I was speaking with someone at Eastbourne Trampoline on Friday, and they mentioned, because we're sort of all in the coaching world, they mentioned, oh, so and so stopped their podcast. I was like, oh, right, okay. Not expecting that, and we'd spoken to them before, Scott, MMA. I'm not entirely sure when they've stopped or whether they'll keep going or what's going on, but I thought, interesting, because their topic is ecological psychology in coaching, sports coaching, how that applies, where that applies, and to me, that could be discussed. That's basically a podcast for any coach conversation, and you bringing in some element of ecological psychology or ecological dynamics and a constraints-led approach into that conversation. Because even though coaches may not understand those words and terms, they likely use constraints because every person will use constraints when they're trying to educate a person.
Hmm.
What those constraints are, the intentions of those constraints, is what coaches can discuss. Whether you agree or disagree, coaches can discuss.
Yeah.
So when I heard the podcast was either slowing down or stopping or whatever is actually officially happening to it, I was a little bit confused, which is why I asked, because yes, we can talk about, like, we talk about literally anything. Like, let's just chat about our days or weeks in this case, and see what emerges from the conversation and how that might relate to an explanation through ecological psychology rather than cognitive psychology. And it's not a right or wrong, it's a here's an explanation of what we think might have happened.
Mm.
And when we come in and sort of start the conversations, I don't come in with any prep. I think, what was something that I have been thinking about over the last week that might be of some interest? And to me, it's extremely easy because I can't talk about things at work. So I know I'm not going to mention any of those. But I talk to other people. Like, I talk to family members, and there are conversations within the family that I can bring up in topic or conversation. Then, when I go out and do things in the world, I can talk about those interactions or my interpretations and understanding of other interactions. So there's always things I can talk about. It's just which things I pick. Like, what interaction or behavior did I observe that has something that I could riff on or explore in a way that might not be typically explored because it's a different approach. And that's why when I come into this podcast, I ask you because I'm like, I got tons of stuff. Like I said, like I could talk for hours.
Yeah. That's a good for me. When I think about like, is there anything to talk about? It's like what to explore, and most of the things that I like. A lot of what I'm doing is work because it's fairly busy because we're coming to the end of the year and people are doing big changes and moving platforms and all the lovely stuff. So a lot of my time is spent under NDA.
hmm
And then there's some small interactions that are quite interesting, but I don't often it's usually through our conversations that they kind of like emerge. It's like, oh yeah, I think it was in our last conversation when we were talking about something, and then I was like, oh, that reminded me of something that Aiden did with this and talking about how he can't do it and just tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can support you, but I want you to have a go. It's like, what do you know? Like, what do you know?
And
And
that,
that was really interesting.
oh yeah, that for me is where study is. Like when people say, "Oh, academia is all in labs and blah blah blah," and yes, because they need controlled environments for the metrics that they're measuring. However, we're always studying. We're always academics because every behavioral experience that we see, that we experience in some way, whether that's us or us observing someone else, is something that we can study, that we can look at, we can pull apart a reaction. Like the smallest of things could be an hour conversation quite easily. So
Mm.
I could take someone's reaction to a comment and discuss all of the various possibilities of why that person might have acted that way. Their intentions could have been these three things, depending on what they were thinking about at the time of that behavior. And if it was thing one, maybe they're doing thing one because they paid attention to that information from that person, which encouraged them to act in this way because they wanted to try and get that outcome. That was the intention. Or they acted in this way for reason two, because they focused on that information, which is different from the previously discussed information about a person's reaction. Maybe it's oh, they raised their eyebrows, so you thought they were confused. Or maybe they frowned, so they thought they were angry. Like, as a perfect example of this, yesterday when we were in the shop, my dad mouthed Tesco at me. Now, I looked at him in a confused face because in sign language, if you're confused, you look confused. And he then proceeded to say Tesco three more times. And that's because for me, we discussed this afterwards, but for me, I was expecting something like, what about Tesco? Are you going to Tesco's next? Have you just been to Tesco's? Do you want to buy something in Tesco's? Are you just saying Tesco's because you've seen something on the shelf and you're like, oh look, I can get that in Tesco's for cheaper? Like I don't know what you mean by Tesco apart from it's a shop. You know what I mean? So I got confused, which is why I looked confused. But my dad, not knowing sign language, just repeated the same thing. Afterwards, I realized, like, he told me, oh, he had pointed to my mum, so him and my mum were going to go to Tesco's next. But I didn't see the point, and there was no next. It was just Tesco. And I'm like, cool. And that interaction could be discussed in various, like, through various avenues. Because is it the lip reading that's the problem from my side? Because that's what he thought. No, because I understood it. But then I tried to sign back to him, but he didn't understand my science because he doesn't know finger spelling. And then is it his lack of understanding of BSL, or is it my lack of understanding of what he didn't understand as part of my confusion sign? Because it's still an interaction from my side. So there's lots of different parts of that very small interaction that we can pick apart and reflect on. So when people say, I don't know what to talk about, I'm like, how do you not know what to talk about? There is so much we could talk about. Do you, do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And it even this in itself is interesting to talk about because it is that like attunement of information. Like how big is that information? How high in the field is it? Like how red is it? How bright is it? Is it bright? Is it dim? Do you not see it as interesting? And it's I quite like that those little tiny interactions for you are as bright as like they're all very bright. That must be so interesting to experience all the time.
Well, yeah, like I just picked out one 5 second interaction between myself and my dad, but I was focused in on what I was potentially interpreting from the situation and what my dad, what I thought my dad was thinking about. But during that like interaction, 5 second interaction, the person on like manning the till was looking at me, then my dad, then me and my dad, because neither of us was saying anything. We weren't vocalizing anything. So I'm like, okay, so what are they wondering about? What are they curious about? Because they started looking at me, then they looked at my dad, then they looked back at me and they looked more confused, then they looked at my dad and looked surprised. So are they wondering, like, would they be interested in learning sign language? Are they confused? Have they seen it before? Is this a common interaction? Like, what was their experience? And then the people that were actually paying, because I had paid and there were people paying for their stuff, and my dad was behind them in the queue. Like, one of them was looking at me like, confused. Like, what are you doing? Because I'm doing something that they don't normally experience. That in itself, like I could explore those two or three interactions, but then that as a system itself could also be, well, this shows that sign language is, or lip reading, non-verbal communication, sign language, whatever you want to describe it as, isn't common in that shop. Is it common in other shops? And again, like this is just a 5 second thing that we could talk on and riff on for an hour, 2 hours. I mean, we've already done it for 10 minutes now. Um,
Feels better than
and
that.
I'm like, how can people not know what to talk about? There's always things to talk about. And then when you go into Lidl's, like the shop that I was in, walking around the shop, various interactions between people. So just going into a shop, doing your shopping and leaving has academically relevant information that you could use to talk about and study and reflect on. Some people may say that's overthinking. I would say that's reflecting on interactions and using it to educate your future behavior, which is what reflection is. You're just sitting there like, yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like the experience of your experience that you're sharing is really quite interesting because I'm just like, oh, that's like often for me, if I'm going out, I'm trying to not engage with all those interactions. Like I am trying to constrain the field because it's overwhelming. Like I find it overwhelming.
What do you mean by constrain? Like, what are you constraining there?
So I'm focusing my attention. So my attention is shifted to the thing I need to do, to the action I'm trying to take, to the behavior I'm trying to.
Such as?
Say for if I'm going to the shop, I'm like, right, I need to get this, I need to get this. I have an intention. I know what I want to get. And I just want to get to that part of the shop, get that thing, and get out
Mm-hmm. I'm the same.
as soon as possible.
I'm exactly the same. I'm in and out of shops in 5 minutes. I have my list. I walk in, I go exactly to the places, and then I get out.
Does it when you're with other people that it's like the interactions are different then? The interesting, because that's
Nope.
interesting, because I don't see those 5 minute interactions. I used to.
Second.
I used to. Hmm?
Five
Second.
second. Yeah.
There's 5 second interactions. I used to, but I
So
don't attune my like I don't attune my focus to it anymore. Again, are you attuning your focus to the interaction
no.
afterwards, I suppose?
No, yeah, this is retrospective. I'm thinking about those experiences afterwards. That's what reflection is, because as we've discussed, we are remembering. So I'm
Mm,
remembering things. I would imagine, because most individuals do this, once you've been in a shop and out of a shop, you can still think about your experiences being in that shop. So
mm,
I could describe one of my typical shops in Asda. I walk in, I walk past everyone faster than most, like faster than like what I walk faster than most people. So I just walk past everyone because they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. That's an interaction in itself that I could discuss. Then when I pick up the basket, I make sure I pick up a basket that hasn't got stuff in it. And again, that's an interaction I can discuss because I'm looking for a basket as I'm going in. Why do I do that? Do other people do that? I don't know. Like, I assume people are looking at a basket to make sure there's not loads of stuff in it. Then when I pick that up, again, I know exactly where I'm going. I go to get the carrots, then I go and get the other veg, then I go around to get the fruit, and I get the other veggies on the other side. Then I go to the reduced section because that's right at the back of the store because that's closer than the next bit, which is going to the milk, which is literally straight line all the way down the other end. And again, any small thing,
do you follow the same route each time you go through the shop?
yeah,
Or is it dependent on whether it's the closest? Do you
I
take the fastest route or do you follow the same route every single time? Because that's something
fastest route for the things I pick up.
interesting. See, I will follow the same route each time.
Okay. But this is what I mean. This,
Yeah,
like, you are paying attention to things when you shop. So when you say constrain, I'm like, but what are you constraining out?
that's true.
Because I would imagine if you experience an interaction somewhere in the shop that is significant enough to you for you to think about, you are likely going to it's going to be easier to remember than other interactions. Like, I have no idea what most of the people are doing in the shop. but those small interactions where I do take note of something that's going on, like when I went to Asda last time, there was a lady in a purple, a pink like knitted jumper jacket thing, and she walked into one of the trolley people. Like I remember that because I remember the pink jacket. Like that, I was like, oh, that's different, and carried on. I had no idea what was going on because again, I'm going to get my milk. Like that's where I was off to. But I remember that. I remember I had just I'd walked from the reduced section. I was walking down the back of the store to get to the milk, and there was this older lady in a pink like knitted cardigan jacket thing, and walked in the way of some uh, Asda colleague shopper person. I was like, okay, cool, and carried on walking. But that is another interaction that I could discuss for a while. Like there's lots of points in there that I could use because of the information that I remember. And even if the information is incorrect, it's still useful because it's an interaction that I'm thinking about. And the interaction likely would happen. And now I have an example for an experience that I could discuss. So you're thinking, you're like, yeah, true.
Yeah, I think I've always got to the point in conversation, like given my interactions with the people around me on a day-to-day basis, the output, I suppose, if you want to call it that, like the conversations are often um requested to be like simplified,
Mhm.
streamlined,
Yep.
because it's too much. Because often I will go into a one of these conversations and after just stop talking, please. So yes, but this is so interesting.
That that's the point of having the conversation though. Like
Yeah.
if they disengage from the conversation, fine, move on. But if they don't, then there's something interesting. And what I do
Mm,
when I'm in a conversation is try and pick on the things that the other person is also interested in.
mm,
Like if they go, oh, yeah, that's a good point, or maybe they contribute to a certain topic that I've brought up, that's something that they have also found interesting or they can relate to in some way. The relationship, the organism environment relationship there is more rich for them. So I continue the conversation with them and see where that goes. Now, granted, a lot of the time when these sorts of interactions happen, it's coming from personal experiences. And this is where people get emotionally attached to what it is that they're talking about. I personally don't get emotionally attached to the conversations I'm discussing because I'm discussing the behavior as a behavior. I'm not discussing the behavior as this is the right way to do it as me. This is right for me. My brain works like this, or I act like that because of XYZ. It's, or my rationale is this. If we want to challenge that, let's do it. Other people are less able to do that because of various skills they haven't developed for whatever reason. So sometimes they get emotionally charged and the conversation just ends abruptly, which, fine, okay. But again, that is something we can discuss. Like, just the abrupt ending of a conversation because someone has been emotionally charged or too directed on information that is making them less open to the conversation. I can't control all of that. I can I can do my best to be as objective and less emotionally driven with the comments that I make, but I don't know how people are going to interpret the words that I'm using. Because everyone, as I've mentioned, meanings are in people, not words. So
mm.
everyone will take a different meaning from the words that I choose to use. I try and be particular, but yeah, it's far too difficult to, well, I think it's impossible to not annoy people by using words.
Yeah, because the meanings are so different. They
Yeah.
can be so different.
I mean, even we won't explore this topic unless you're comfortable, but race can mean so many different things to so many different people,
Mm.
and it's extremely complex.
I mean, an easy one we could very easily talk about because I'm having experience of it now is gender. Like
Yeah,
that in itself is complicated as hell as well.
as I say,
Like,
meanings are in people, not words. and gender can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah. I mean, my big experience, I suppose, which might actually be quite interesting to talk about, it's just a small, tiny one where I am now publicly out as Amelia almost everywhere.
Mhm.
The final step was to get, I now legally have changed my name through Depop, which was very exciting and took far longer than I thought it was going to take. But I've now legally changed my name, so now my name is Amelia, which is amazing and exciting. And it was interesting because the person who signed the papers was someone who's been on the podcast before, because I had to have a witness, and it was Carl who signed
All
the
right.
papers. And
Oh,
the
that's
worst part
nice.
of it was the fact that he had to fill out a form. It's like he didn't care about the other pieces. Actually, that's a very interesting conversation. So here we go. I found one. This one's really interesting. Well, I think it is anyway. Um, so my friend Carl was one of the first people to know, outside of obviously the immediate family, about my like journey. And his family, he has a very interesting perspective of like, what do I say? And people started asking him questions because I'm in a dress in my photo. Like I spent most of my kind of adult life with a beard. And it was interesting because one member of his family was like noticed and went, "Oh, he, he kind of looks like a girl." And that freaked my friend out. Like freaked Carl out completely. I didn't really know what to say, so I said, "Oh, well, I don't know, but you should ask them because it's not my place to say." And I'm like, because for me, like it's it's not a big deal. I'm just being me. Like, although it is like it can be perceived as quite a big change, like it's just me being me. Like that's it. It's what I want to do. It makes me happy. It brings me joy. It helps me to, express who I am. So it's matter of factly.
So I'm curious, when Carl said that ask them because it's not my story to tell,
Mm.
what how did that make you feel?
Um, I was confused. I was like, yeah, sure. I guess they can come to me. I mean, you can just tell them, like and I do have this I do have this rela I do have this very strange relationship in which I just go, well, and this happened because his brother started asking questions and noticed that my one of my PlayStation's accounts had changed my PlayStation account had changed from my dead name to Amelia, and he asked. And Carl stumbled and didn't know and couldn't find the words and couldn't express them and couldn't. I was like, do you want some help? Because I just don't know what to say. I don't know how to ask. I don't know what words to use and the correct words to use. I'm like, okay, just put me on loudspeaker and I don't mind explaining it. It's fine. And I just turn out. So I'm transgender. My name is Amelia.
See, that to me is what Carl's struggling with there is what I think a lot of people struggle with in general. It's not the I don't know what to say. They know
It,
what to say, they know what words to say, but they don't know what the meaning will mean to other
mm,
people, and they don't want to get it
mm.
wrong. And
And
the
also that he did say and did express quite, it's like, I don't know how they're going to react. And I'm like, I know, that's okay. And I'm here and I can add, and if they start asking questions that you are uncomfortable with, point them to me. Or they may not come and ask. I said, then that's their problem. Like I am very open and I'm very happy to discuss that.
But that right there is why I'm fine with any conversation, because to me, words are used for communication.
Yeah.
They're not like words don't make people angry.
No.
People make themselves angry.
Yeah.
because of the meaning they put behind the words. So if I say the wrong, I don't think there is a wrong word, then it's down to the people interpreting the meaning of the words that I've used to work out whatever it is, whether it was intended to be offensive or not.
This actually is part of another conversation because I came out to every single D&D group this week and they were like, I said, oh, it's amazing, I'm really happy for you, but I will mess up. And I'm like, I know, I expect you to. And as long as the intention behind it is completely and utterly,
Genuine, like,
if it's
oops,
genuine,
sorry.
I don't care. Like, I will correct you because I know it helps. I will say, hey, don't forget it's this, or hey, Amelia, or hey, she, or like those pieces I will correct because it's helpful.
I don't know whether this is like useful or not, but from my experience at the moment anyway, over the last couple of years, I've just avoided using he and she. It's just they, them, and use their
Yeah,
name.
there's a it's called the lazy they. I also do the same thing.
Because like I could use he and she, but it runs the risk of the whoever it is finding offense to it because their meaning of the word is different to mine. So I just avoid it. Like I'm happy to have that conversation with the person and say, "Oh, sorry, that's my mistake. I will use whatever pronouns you would prefer."
Yeah.
But that's an interaction I would prefer to avoid most of the time
Mm.
because I mean it's going to sound lazy, but I just don't want to have that interaction with people like a lot of the time. So it's just using their name because their name is more accurate anyway, because he and she, like in Old English, is seen as rude. No, like,
Mm.
she has a name. Like that's what I was.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
when you talk about your mum, you know, oh yeah, she. No, no, no. She has a name. It's mum or Francine or whatever the name is. Um, she has a name. Use it. So I do. Um, and using they and them is far easier to avoid the potential pronoun conflicts. And it doesn't.
Because from someone who has been quote unquote mispronounced, it does hurt. So it's easier to use either a name or they. Like I am more happy for people to call me they them versus he, and that's easier to. That's exactly the approach that I've taken the entire time. If I am corrected or people go, no, 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 it's she, her, I'm like, cool, I remember that. But otherwise, I will just use they, them because there is a reduction of like yeah, it's just all their name.
Hmm. I think this relates to the conversation we had off recording a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it might have been about a month ago now, about the meaning of the word he. Like your meaning and my meaning are different, as they will be for every person. And I feel like that is where like society's views on what words mean get really interesting to look at because obviously language is interesting anyway, linguistics. So he can mean so many different things. And I think the cultures, like some of the cultures that are not, I don't want to say modern because they are modern. It's just,
Western, are you looking for Western?
yeah, but that's not even accurate because there are Western
No.
countries that are not modern. The countries that are, I guess, more online, because that's where I tend to see the relation, because more countries that are online and having conversations online tend to be more modern Western thinking. Um, that the other cultures, the other countries out of that, they have again a different meaning to he, even though it is more similar to the older generations of he, it's still not the same. Like some of the African countries, like he is dominant over she, which well, that's older thinking, but it's their meaning moving forwards, well, actually, no, they're even. Oh, okay. And actually, in some cultures, it's the other way around. I mean, you look at animals, some of the females have dominance over the males. So the meaning of he and she is so flexible.
Mhm.
And as a not, I'm not a linguist, but as someone that's interested in language, I'm just curious why we still use them. Like, well, how does it benefit? What is the point? What's the reason for them? Because if we're using it to describe people, if it's someone with a beard, say they have a beard. If it's someone without a beard, they don't have a beard. If they have hair, they don't have hair. Like explain features rather than some social construct that we've created to help
because
categorize people.
because because it's easier.
Yeah, but what's easier?
It's not easier. I completely agree with you, but that is it because labels, because people become attached to those labels and those labels become part of their identity. And so the identity is so important
But
that
that's
it
individual. I'm talking as a species. Why do we still use he and her? Like what?
because be, that exact that's exactly the reason why, because they're labels and there is so much attached, there is emotion attached to those labels. That's
But
that's
I
kind of
don't see how. Unless you're categorizing people from biological reasons, or arguably biological reasons anyway, then you have a group of people. Okay, those groups of people are similar because they all have beards or they are all tall. That doesn't mean they're all men.
no.
So they are over there, they are over there. So linguistically, there's.
I don't even know why.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like
It doesn't really make sense.
when
Like
you step back and you look at modern society, however you want to define that, meanings are people, not words. The he and the she is a bit, I don't know,
binary,
useless. Yeah.
hence the emergence of non-binary and gender fluid. It's still
Yes,
but though but and I
but that
think
still
but also
recognizes.
there's still a reckon because I had this conversation with Tori the other day of like and Carl actually asked like gender fluid you go between, but there is a between. So there's like there's one and then the other, and then there's like what is that? Was basically the question. It's like what, how? And
Again,
there is still a with non-binary, with gender fluid, there is a you're going between two things, which is
fractal measurements. Like, are we looking at this thing? Okay, how are you defining this thing? What are the lines you're drawing in the sand? Beard, whatever, in genes, genetics, but everyone's going to be different. In the brain, again, everyone's going to be different. The way you look, again, everyone's going to be different. So those lines you draw in the sand for this category, this fractal of measurement, again, is going to be different. So you have to zoom out. But as you zoom out, you include more people that don't quite fit the measure. So you zoom out again, and you end up zooming out to we're all humans. Well, how do you define we're all humans? Because there are other creatures on this planet that are quite similar in certain areas. So if you take out this metric, well, now you're taking out that human over there because they are more like that species over there. So the words and language we choose to use, I mean, it's fallible. It's inaccurate, which we already know, which is why meanings are important to understand when you're having a conversation. And then, unless the words that you're choosing to use have meaning in that conversation that's useful, why don't we just get rid of the word or get rid of the use of the words? There are, because I think holding on to, again, this is, we are very open in our conversation, people listening. So be aware. um, the way that I see gender is it's a category that we created to help us out in the past to, I would argue, discriminate against certain groups of people. But we don't want to do that. And most people now recognize we don't want to do that. So why do we keep the category in that helps people do that? To me, that's a constraint that's encouraging something that we don't want to encourage. So why not remove the constraint? You know what I mean?
yeah, I agree. Problem is
Yes, I know there's loads of problems. I'm just saying,
yeah,
what's
like
the argument for them?
yes,
What's the argument for it?
like I it would be yeah.
I'm trying to play both sides here. This is me, orange me and blue me, like
Yeah.
talking. This is how I
It's
battle these things. I'm like, what is the argument for keeping this? What,
But it's exactly what you said it was. It is for discrimination. Because then
but I don't
some
think anyone would support that argument.
you,
If you ask people, are you use race because that's a bigger one that people have spoken about. If you say someone, are you racist? Most people would say, no, I'm not. Even though some of their behaviors could be perceived as racist by other people because of their meaning behind the word.
hmm,
If you remove race as a category that you could use to describe individuals, well, now you're not being racist, but discrimination still exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist because it does.
hmm,
But it means that the behaviors are looked at as behaviors, not as, oh, that's racist or that's not racist. It was, okay, that was a behavior that could have been perceived as negative. I'm just going to use negative instead of all the other words, negative towards that person. But if the intention was for humor or for description or for comparison, not to say you are worse because of this, but to say you are different because of that, i.e., you have a beard, you don't have a beard.
hmm.
Like there's nothing bad or wrong about saying you have a beard, you don't have a beard, or you are taller
I
than this
don't. It's
person.
the sad thing is that it's become wrong. Is that there is a right or wrong way? Like it's
Yeah.
emerged over time of like you're not supposed to say this or not supposed to say that. People would absolutely like when I came out and did the big thing only because I was asked to by an individual by someone who was running the games, just so that everyone knew and so everyone felt could it to I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because it was needed, so that it was I was honest with people. And I don't and that I value. I like, yeah, cool, this is who I am, this is how I would prefer it, this is blah 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 blah. But before then, I was, I lost the beard when, like, I changed my clothes. Like, I slowly, if you go back even over the podcast, before I even said anything publicly, there were differences.
Obvious differences, in my opinion, but
Yeah, obviously. I thank you for saying that because I do not perceive that half the time. But thank you. But they were obvious differences to everybody, which is one very affirming for me. And it's like, good, cool. That's exactly my intention with what I'm doing. And to it, but no one asked. And for most of the time, I didn't bother really talking about it or engaging because at the end of the day, the individual here is still the individual. Although I am now feminine presenting, I still hold my own, I still have very similar competences, very similar like confidence, and actually my confidence has increased, which is great, which is exactly the point. Like my character hasn't changed. Like the things that I hold important to me, my values are still the same.
see, I
They
don't
are
understand. Tell me if I'm going somewhere off here, but I don't understand why you had to announce it to a group.
um I don't quite know why. It was more so that everybody knew what was going on. And so they knew how to refer to me. Because I think it was I assume, look after me and ensure they refer to me correct so that the social structures remain in place appropriately.
Yeah, that would be my assumption, and I don't like it.
Mm, no. The way I wanted to do it would be, hi, I'm Amelia. Call me Amelia. And then that would be it. Like that's it. That's really it. And also, most of the time, and actually the DM said it very well, it's like most of the time when you sit down, you put your real self in a bag of holding for D&D people, and you are your character. And that for me is fine. Like I am happy to be my characters that I play because that's the point.
This is what I mean. Like, you're not, I don't perceive you as different.
Hmm,
Like, the words, the labels that we use to describe people will always change
hmm,
because language changes, descriptions changes. Like, as you get older, you get taller. I'm
hmm,
using these as obvious metrics because they are politically safer in a podcast.
Yeah.
But as you get older, you get taller. Like Nan says, "Oh, you've grown since I last saw you." Yeah, because humans change. I
Yeah.
don't understand. Like the 5-year-old that is now the 10-year-old isn't going to go to Nan. By the way, I'm now 6'3" instead of 4'2". Like, why do you need to announce that? I just don't get it. Um, so
Because
when
it's beyond, because it's not expected. That I think is the sad reality of it. Because for me, I just want to and that's why it took me so long, because I was like, I'm just presenting differently now.
I would, but even you saying why it took me so long, I don't think it did take you so long. I don't think it took you
No,
long at all. I think other
no, it didn't.
people feel it took long because they didn't know what to do about it. And
Yes.
I would argue that's because of, this is going to sound harsh, because of their worries and their problems
Yeah.
and their insecurities.
Oh yeah, it is totally that. Like
And
I
I'm
did it
like,
very quickly for me.
yeah, but like, unfortunately, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people now. And they just don't have the
And
confidence.
I think you were talking about earlier why. That might be why.
Mm,
Because that it goes back to our conversation earlier about the emotional response
mm.
and me like having an emotional response. And right now, for some unknown fucking reason, trans individuals are very political. Like they have become political. And so
Anything that isn't,
the norm.
it's not even that, because some things that are the norm are still like hot topics to talk about, like
Yeah, that's
taboo.
true. That's
Um,
true.
so anything that brings up change,
Yeah,
really, is like, oh no,
that can't happen.
we need to get this right. What the
Mm.
fuck? What
I
does that
don't
mean?
care.
What does
And
getting it
I
right
said this
mean?
to every single person that I've spoken to. I was like, I don't care if you mess it up. Correct yourself, we'll move on. It's fine. Like I've spent X amount of years in as one identity.
I'm curious.
Mm.
Correct yourself. You should correct yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So if, for example, someone calls me a name that I don't go by,
Hmm.
i.e., an offensive name,
Hmm.
would I ask them to correct themselves? Like, if they call me an idiot, like, I'm not going to say, "Oh no, correct yourself."
That's funny.
I don't have an answer here. I'm curious
Yeah, that's a really good. I think
because it's a label to a person, but it's not
it
what we would
is.
class as a name. But what is a name?
Yeah.
It's a word you use to grab someone's attention or to refer to someone else. But the name could be a descriptor, i.e., they, them, the
Hmm.
person with the long hair, the person with the glasses, the person with the beard. So, like, when I think about a name, it's, I mean, talking about code here, it's an identifier. You have an
Yes.
identifier and it
Yeah.
is your name, but you could be identified by loads of other different things. So is it correct? Is it correcting them?
Um, it is perceived as correcting. Like the perception is to correct yourself and it's simple language. For me, whenever I say correct yourself, it's use the name that I prefer. Like
Okay.
that matches my identity. It's a shortcut to use the name that I prefer because that assuming the assumption is people want to respect how I wish to identify, wish to use the labels that match my experience, like my own personal experience. And if that is the case, then in that way, I correct yourself is what I mean by that.
Okay. The reason I ask is I've got a friend that also has a transgender child, and they still use the name that they gave them at birth because they've used the name for like 40 plus years, and it's difficult to change the habit of referring to them.
Yeah.
And I know both names, like both names of the child. So it doesn't really matter what name the person uses because I still know the individual they are talking about.
Mm.
And even if they don't use a name, I still know who they're talking about because of the description of the conversation that they're having. Like some
Mm.
of the descriptors in there, I can be obvious, and I can think of the individual that they're talking about without any specific identifying information.
Mm.
And I wouldn't say I correct them. I would confirm if I'm not sure who it is they're talking about,
Mm.
but that's it. And I, again, this is me being somewhat emotionally detached to the language that people use around me. I'm not fussed what people call me. I will react in the same way. If I recognize that you want to like grab my attention by using a descriptor, then I will react to that. You can call me any name under the sun, and I will react to that in the same way.
Mm.
Which is obviously frustrating when people start swearing at me and calling me bad names, and I look at them as if they've just said my name because they're expecting me to get angry, but I don't because I'm not bothered. Sometimes I don't react because I don't hear. Sometimes I don't react because I don't realize that they're talking to me because they're not using an identifier that I recognize. But if they're shouting at my face bad words and pointing at me, I know they're probably trying to talk to me and likely swearing at me. So I will say, "What would you like? How can I help?" Etc., etc. Does that wind them up? Yes. Do I do it deliberately? Sometimes. But
I enjoyed that. I was not setting a yes sometimes.
yeah, when I was refereeing football, you got parents on the sideline, they're swearing at you, oh, you don't effing know what effing this, and you see that. Okay, sorry, what was that, sir? Okay, thank you for your opinion. I'm gonna go referee now. Right, whatever. Does it annoy them? Yes. If they then continue, what do? Give them a red card, they then get a £30 bill, and then they have to go off to the field because I'm in charge. Like, that's what happens. If they want to go and punch me, good luck catching me. I'm faster than you. Uh, so that's the way that I interact with individuals. Like I've never had to run away from someone because I know how to manage conversations fairly well, I feel. But again, the identifiers, I'm not bothered. I am just
Mm.
not bothered. If I recognize that you want my attention, then I will half listen because I've only got one ear.
Mm.
But I don't think that is a very common perspective.
Mm.
I haven't met anyone that's the same as me
Mm.
in that way, which is confusing because I don't understand why not. But that's me. Obviously, my bias is
Mm.
the way that I think.
Mm. That is interesting. I don't like it.
I came to this conclusion through my own battles of mental health. I'm using mental health as a descriptor because people recognize what that is, but I wouldn't class it as mental health. I would say it's my own health, just general health. But when I say health, people think, oh, physical health. What was wrong with you? Were you in a coma? No. I was trying to commit suicide. Oh, that's mental health. Oh, if you say so. So I know these are meant to be like really dark taboo topics that you don't talk about. For me, they're just words that describe experiences.
Yeah, it, I often get into trouble for being very blasé about it.
But again, blasé about what? It's just a human experience. Yes, and people
Okay,
have
yeah,
emotional.
blasé about human experience.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that
people have emotional attachments to them,
yeah.
and yes, I am emotionally attached to it, obviously, because I am a human. I have emotions, but I don't use my emotions as a way to respond. I
Mm.
look at the words and react how I feel is appropriate to that situation. Do I get angry? Yes. Do I lose my shit? Sometimes, not often, because I try and look at all of the perspectives.
Mm.
I look at the intentions. Again, this is ecologically driven. I look at the intentions of the individual. Was the intention of that person to insult me?
Mm.
A lot of the time, it's not. So why am I feeling insulted? Oh,
Mm.
I don't really know why I'm feeling insulted. Let's stop that.
Yeah, and that's kind of like when I approach my whole experience of being transgender, that is how I approach it. It's like I don't even. Do I like correct? Yeah, as I said before, the correction is like how I wish to be referred to. It's kind of like when someone uses a nickname you don't like.
I would say yes, but I have not experienced that.
So fascinating. That in itself is so fascinating to me because I don't because there are many nicknames that I don't like from my experiences.
I,
There are multiple names that have been used I just don't like.
I, the deaf kid, like I I don't like or dislike being called the deaf kid. It's not accurate because I'm only half deaf. I had an argument with a deaf person about this the other day. Um, like profoundly deaf person, we were signing, and it was getting. Um, I don't want to say emotionally charged because all sign is emotionally charged because it's physical, but it was getting more animated than previous conversations. But I don't dislike the name. It's not accurate. What I did dislike when I was at school is that people assumed I couldn't do things because of that. And it wasn't the
Mhm.
name, like the deaf kid, yeah, fine, whatever. Oh, they probably didn't hear that. Yeah, it's a joke. My dad saying, oh, you didn't hear that. It's on your deaf side. Yeah, selective hearing. Yeah, fine, whatever, cool. Yeah, funny, joke, whatever. It's if I'm separated, oh, you can't do this because that's where I was like, okay, now I don't like it. Or when people say or said, oh, it doesn't matter because I didn't hear it. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. It doesn't matter because I didn't hear it. So it's not the name, the nickname that was frustrating. It was the behaviors that people assumed I couldn't do something because of something that they thought I struggled with. I'm like, okay. So it's the behaviors that frustrated me rather than the language itself, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, call me what you want. Not fussed. I mean, what I would say when I do recognize that, okay, I'm getting frustrated at something, and again, a lot of the time, well, most of the time when I'm frustrated at something, it's because of behaviors and people are doing what they said that they wouldn't do. That frustrates me because
Mm.
I get confused as to what to expect. If you
Yeah.
say, I'm going to use a trampoline example again. If you say, I'm going to coach on this trampoline, you coach on that trampoline, and then you come and coach the people that I'm working on my trampoline, I get frustrated because you said you weren't going to come over here. And if you said I can coach the way that I want to coach, and then you tell me off for coaching the way that I want to coach, I get frustrated because I now don't know what to do.
Mm.
Now, on Saturday, so yesterday, I had multiple experiences of the same thing within a few minutes, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a break, I'm going to go to the loo, and I'm going to come back, and then we'll sort it out from there. So I needed to separate myself from the situation to reflect without being in that situation. I kept my cool, I was fine. Like the worst that someone saw me was walk over to my phone, pick it up, look a bit frustrated, and then walk out the room and then come back a couple of minutes later. But that was it. Been there, done that, gone, finished. Spoken with the coach afterwards, chatted about it, all sorted. No issues.
Mm.
Am I still frustrated by some of the things? Yeah. But, and it's gone, it's done. Reflect, act differently next time. Now I know if they're going to go and do that, I just go over to the other trampoline and coach their kids. Sorted. It's just so much simpler than getting angry and frustrated and sit there seething and then start writing messages and thinking, oh, what about this and what about that? And then catastrophizing. I don't even know if
Mm.
that's a word. I think I just made it up, but
No, it's a word.
okay. But yeah, yeah, that's the way I see it anyway. Which, as I mentioned, I think is different from a lot of people.
I don't know. I don't think it's different. I just think the the breadth of because I relate to that in many circumstances, but some I can't
Yet.
yet. Yeah, exactly. Um, and I think from my perspective, like it's so much around the the depth and breadth of experiences where you can just be completely like not give a shit. And it's not even not giving it, it's just not a thing. It's why Tori noted that when you weren't here and I wasn't freaking out, Tori was like, normally you'd be freaked out by now. I'm like, yeah, I know that he'll be here when he's here.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I also resonate with the if someone behaves in a way and then they say they'll behave in a way but don't, that and like that is confusing to me, and that is about the time where I just get frustrated. That's my frustration point. That when they say they would speak this way but don't, like that's where I get frustrated. I have quite a few experiences of that. And so, and I take myself out of the situation most of the time. Sometimes I don't, but hey, yeah. That's
Yep.
that. I just need to gain competency in doing that, and it's a skill to learn. That's it. And so I work on that.
It is definitely a skill to learn because there are so many different situations that you could obviously there's endless situations because life is it's unique.
Okay.
Every experience is unique. But there are going to be build-ups to some situations that hit hit you harder than you expect, I guess is how I would describe it. Um,
Mm.
but like you said, I I would say I if I say something, I'm going to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much doubt that I wouldn't do the thing.
Mm.
So people can trust what I say. That I think is security in the way that people act around me. Those people that don't do what they say brings in more trepidation and nerves. You're like, oh, I don't really know what they're going to do. They're a bit of a loose cannon, as it were. That's where people can get nervous. And if you've got lots of those sorts of people in the same situation, in the same group, same environment, that's where you're more likely to find arguments. Like at football games, you don't know how people are going to react.
Mm.
Rugby is different. You don't expect people to lose it at a rugby match. You do expect people to lose it at a football match, but you don't know when or who or what's going to happen. I don't know whether you knew that, but yeah. Rugby is traditionally it's more traditionally an upper school, private school sport. So they're gentlemen that play rugby, whereas they're hooligans that play football. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I've been told that I'm too posh to be playing football. Yeah, I speak too posh to play football. Yeah. That's the history of sports, which we won't get into because again, that's like a lecture, but
Society.
like I say, I could talk for hours. When I go to trampoline competitions, I talk literally the entire competition to people about various things of all topics, shapes and sizes and colors and the rest of it. So yeah, that's uh, days and days of talking. But talking is sharing experiences, and when you pay attention to lots of information and various experiences, as we've discussed, you can talk for days.
Pay attention.
Yeah.
What do you mean by pay attention?
Focus your attention on information.
Cool.
When you look out of a window, there is lots of specifying information. When you pay attention, you attune your focus to specific specifying information that you deem relevant to the intention of the behavior you're doing at the time.
And it
So,
doesn't need to be in that specific moment because you could attune to information from the past.
exactly. Like when I was looking out of the window yesterday, it started snowing. Now, at the time, I didn't pay much attention to it because it was just snowing. So what? But now I'm paying more attention to it because I'm recognizing the specifying information that I'm attuning to now from that past, as you mentioned, in air quotes, past experience. Even when I look out the window, I'm looking out the window now. Now I'm looking back at the camera. I can retrospectively talk to you about the leaves that were moving because there's wind outside, but I'm not perceiving that right now because that happened a couple of seconds ago. But I'm still attuning my focus or paying attention to an experience that happened however many seconds ago.
Mm.
So, yes, fun conversation. It's been about an hour. Do you want to add anything else?
No, it's
Time,
good.
time flies when you're having fun.
Doesn't it? See
Right.
you soon. Bye.
Bye.